This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you an exclusive interview with Secretary, Ministry of Coal, Dr. ANIL Kumar Jain. The interviewer is economic analyst Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee.
Mr. ANIL Jain, very warm welcome to All India Radio.
Thank you very much.
We are speaking today to the Secretary, Ministry of Coal. And to tell our listeners, Mr. Jain is not only just the secretary, he also is the architect of a large part of India's energy policy over the past few decades. His work on developing India's energy policy website is a model for students who want to understand how India's energy security has been framed. He has created probably more analytical tools to analyze India's energy issues than probably few universities can handle one full semester. So Mr. Jain, last year, when crisis in the Indian energy security, in the Indian energy scenario developed, so without me trying to say anything, how did it develop and what were the ways in which you went about handling it, almost sitting like as a control room?
Now let me take you back last year to the sad events which took over major part of the world, including India, in the months of April, May and June with the Delta strain of the COVID-19. It was at that time the whole country went into a lockdown. Shops closed, factories closed, malls closed, and the power consumption really fell down. Incidentally, the spillover of coal stocks with the coal mines of Coal India Limited were historically high when the year began.
And that happened obviously because, as you say, the power demand fell, so there was no offtake from the mines, so Coal India's stock went up massively.
That also happened because of the first strain of COVID, which struck the globe for the first time in the year 2021. So in 21 year ending, in 31st March 2021, we were carrying huge stocks and then the Delta strain came. So our production was impacted. There was not much demand, and traditionally in the period of Q1, which is April, May, June, power plants stock up coal because then in Q2, which we are seeing right now, July, August, September, the monsoon set in and coal cannot be evacuated comfortably from the coal mines. They get flooded. But last year that stocking up did not happen. There was a lack of enthusiasm from the power sector also for the demand because nobody knew when the Delta wave would be controlled. So when the Delta receded by July last year, the demand was back. And the pent-up demand, factories were running short of supplies, shops were running short of supplies. So production really ramped up. People started coming out of homes. So July, August, September saw the demand really go up. And that is the time when global developments also impacted the coal sector. India traditionally has had 8% of its power generating capacity in the thermal sector based on imported coal supplies. Those power plants were set up along the coasts and they are boilers that are technologically incapable of consuming Indian coal. So due to the global upsurge in demand, coal prices shot up by 3x and those plants, they stopped working because their commercial arrangements with the buyers in the Indian power sector did not easily facilitate the passing on of the high prices of coal.
So you were getting series of bad news one after the other and the coal Mantralaya, and it must have been a very difficult time for you to have marshal all the resources.
Because people feel that India has so much of coal and Coal India Limited is a Sarkari company and coal will be available on demand. So this 8% which plants running at less than half capacity, their demand had to be fulfilled by the Indian coal supplies and there was an upsurge in demand. So all of that led to a situation where by the first week of October, the coal stock at the thermal power plants fell to just maybe 4 days of stock. So it is not that after 4 days the coal would become zero, but it was gradually depleting. And that is the time when there was a national scare and then we had to step in.
And lots of high blood pressure all around.
Certainly, because you cannot allow blackouts and India has never had that. And being responsible governments, responsible officers, that cannot happen.
And you did manage to ensure that there was no major crisis at any particular time. In fact, the daily reports as they showed, while they were localized phenomena, no grid failure or no major upsurge or no major downtime for any industry was reported. So it was a huge learning experience for a country, and you were supplying coal to, as we see from the data, it was about 205 gigawatts of electricity that you were fulfilling. So that sort of a phenomena the credit must go to lots of people for having marshaled it. The coal ministry was at the spearhead of it. How did you coming out of it? What has been the key lessons now that you feel that now we are into the next monsoon, that we are already prepared for and are ready to handle the crisis?
This year the learnings are almost, let us say, a three-pronged strategy. First strategy is that we have been prevailing upon the railway network to give us as many rakes as possible. Because one point which I must share with the listeners is that while we do have enough coal to meet the requirement of the power sector, but sometimes the infrastructure in our mines to be able to evacuate the higher volumes or the railway network availability of rolling stock is not adequate to shift out this sudden upsurge in demand. This year we have been networking with the railway ministry and of course with the power ministry, and I must say the railways have done a fantastic job. So the first strategy has been that we are shipping out as much coal as we can in the first quarter, as a result of which by the end of this month we hope to have much higher coal at the thermal power plants than we have seen in many years. Number one. Number two, Coal India's own production targets have been ramped up. Against the 622 million tons of coal production last year, this year they are likely to produce about 700 million tons. So in this H1, we are hoping to produce at least 20 to 25% more coal. So the second strategy has been that we are producing as much coal as we can, and the first strategy was of course shipping out. And the third strategy is that we have also pressed into action the private sector and the non-CIL coal sector who were given mines. You remember after Supreme Court's cancellation of coal mines in 2014-15, we have been allotting coal mines. So for the last 2 years, we have been working very hard with the states, with these allottees. We are trying to remove all regulatory hurdles. Their production this year against what was 89 million tons last year is going to be about 140 million tons this year. So the captive mines and the private sector, the state gencos, their production has also come as a great shot in the arm towards Atmanirbharta.
Those are very impressive numbers. Our listeners may not often know that coal mine, especially during the monsoon, is a very difficult exercise since large number of our mines are open cast mines. Mr. Jain, with your experiences, how difficult does it become to mine coal during the monsoon session? Would you walk our listeners through some of the challenges that happens so that there's a better appreciation of the scale of effort that's needed?
Coal is actually a surfacial mineral. What we mean by that is that just like limestone, iron ore, bauxite, coal is found quite close to the earth's surface. It's not deep-seated mineral like gold or probably diamond or some other minerals. In the case of coal, you have to remove the earth on top, which at times could be 5 meters thick overburden layer. In the rainy season, as you can see in your own gardens, when rain falls, it soaks into the soil and the soil becomes very wet and difficult to handle. So you can imagine that the stripping ratios, which are often 1:5, which means to remove 1 ton of coal, you have to remove 5 cubic meters of earth. So removal of earth, picking it up, exploiting it and taking it to some distance is a challenge. It has become very heavy. Secondly, the mines get flooded. And most of our coal mines are eastern central India, which are very high rainfall areas. You can imagine that right now in Nagpur and Hyderabad, where we have 2 coal companies, they have received almost 1,000 millimeters of rain in the last 15 days when they are supposed to get 1,400 millimeters in the whole year. So when mines get flooded, it becomes difficult to even remove the coal which may have already been mined and which is lying over there. And then the roads get slushy. There are accidents. These are heavy-duty dumpers, almost carrying 200 tons of coal. So we don't want accidents either. So these are the problems which you face in any mining sector where there is surfacial mineral removal involved.
That's a very major challenge. Also, India is a country where the people often get to see coal traveling from one end of the country to another, and there are often questions that why is it that coal is traveling on the rails, but what they do not probably realize is that coal is so very essential to keep all the power plants spread across the country in good stead. So how do you do this planning exercise? It must be a very complicated, very elaborate exercise with so many power plants across the country.
You have rightly observed this point. What has happened is that in India, the economic sectors have been under some kind of a makeover with introduction of reforms, which is always an evolving process. Energy is such a vital commodity or a service that everybody needs it. Even a poor man needs it as much as a big industrialist might need it to run his industry. So the kind of the pricing structure, and along with that, the subsidy which needs to be given by the state. So it's a very complex maze. And on top of that, we all want to usher in renewable energy. So that has also got to be given a certain pass-through. Against this backdrop, the reforms which have come in, they say that electricity, which is the cheapest, must be put into the system the first. So while every state wants to operate its plants, and we have to give coal to Punjab and to give coal to Karnataka and far-flung places, but at the same time, if the power prices are low, then those plants don't run and they buy power from some other location. So when we cater coal to the power plant, we take into account what might be the need of that state where that power has to be consumed, which is in the very state where the plant is located. But when that plant, because of the opportunity due to the market reform that have happened, also supplies power rather to the distant locations, so suddenly what happens that there is coal at the distant states, but in the nearby states the coal consumption has shot up, and this upsets the entire planning and logistics of the coal. So we are hoping that in the next 1 or 2 years India's coal production will be so much.
Listeners would want to know that how comfortable are we in terms of our energy structure in the country now for the next couple of years?
If you see all over the world, regardless of developing countries or developed countries, in the developed countries in Europe and the developing countries you can see around us, be it Bangladesh, be it Sri Lanka, be it even Pakistan, there is an energy crisis. I'm happy to say that in the case of India, because of the policy followed by our government, our Prime Minister had said that we are going to be very warm to the idea of renewable energy, and we have given ourselves very, very stiff targets. But we will not abandon the path of fulfilling our energy security. So in the last several years, while there was a backlash from the developed countries all over the world that we should not develop fossil fuels, but we steadfastly have increased our coal production, our opening up of coal sector. In 2020, we even launched commercial mining and we unified the regimes of captive plus merchant mining. So India is poised to supply coal to be able to meet its rising demand of electricity domestically. But whenever renewables reach a certain critical mass that they need to displace coal, India will not hesitate to do that, because at the end of the day, renewable energy gives us Atmanirbharta much more than coal does. It even reduces the price of supply of energy. So India will remain an oasis of energy security, I have no doubt, for the coming times.
Also, there's a non-power sector, which is also dependent on coal to a large extent. And there have been crises there, but you have been managing that. How has been your experience in that front?
After 2015, after Supreme Court had cancelled the coal blocks which were given away to private sector and to captives, etc., the government has had a very liberalized regime, which it has been liberalizing over time. So since 2015, now 2022, the 7 years, we have given away a whole lot of mines. And right now also, as we speak, coal mine auction rounds are in progress. Today, the entry barrier to getting a coal mine is virtually negligible. There is no minimum expectation of a capital net worth. There is no expectation of technical experience. And there's a very little revenue share on which the coal blocks are going away. So we are expecting the power sector to be catered largely by Coal India so that, they can meet the requirements of supply of coal at reasonable prices, so the power prices remain static. But the private sector, which runs steel and aluminium, and they supply all over the world now, they are looking at a globalized trade. You have seen how steel sector made tremendous profits in exporting steel, etc., and iron ore. So they need to meet their energy requirement to the extent that they can. Whatever we can give them after meeting the requirements of power, rest they need to produce their own coal, and then they're also dependent on imported supplies.
Well, Mr. Jain, there has been encyclopedic coverage of India's coal sector at a time when probably the world is looking at India's coal sector much more intently than at any time. Your expertise in the sector, which taken our listeners on such a wonderful journey of understanding the dynamics of the sector. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much.
You were listening to an exclusive interview with Secretary, Ministry of Coal, Dr. ANIL Kumar Jain. The interviewer was Economic Analyst Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.